It's time for our weekly segment with Sam Bradshaw of Sikkim365.com. Now, here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
Well, if you go to Sikkim365.com, register, be a part of the premium section, you will get with what Sam Bradshaw does to break down an upcoming opponent with Baylor and Oklahoma, and also looking back at TCU throughout the week, and then he'll eventually have his comments Saturday evening or so on the results. Sam Bradshaw, Sikkim 365 Radio. So, Sam, I thought I heard Dave Aranda Monday mentioning, and as we know, they could not get to Chandler Morris. A couple of times probably did, but they couldn't wrap him up. Does what they do trying to stop the run affect them being able to get to the quarterback unless it's Petrie and Terrell Bernard?
Thanks for having me on. And first and foremost, just with that game, part of it was Morris doing great in terms of his throws. I mean, the throw on the flea flicker was perfect. Baylor had two guys in position. They still threaded it in there. Schematically, it doesn't stop you from getting pressure, but your guys have to win one-on-ones, and they didn't get that done consistently against TCU. And you had 3, 4, maybe even 5 times you had Morris in the backfield, but you let him go. And if you do that against a mobile quarterback who's accurate and can throw downfield, they can extend drives on you, and that's what happened. And, you know, Baylor didn't do completely terrible on defense that day. The result was, but their red zone defense largely kept them in there, despite some other mistakes they were making, and they absolutely shut down TCU's running game. They got them to a lot of long yardage situations as well. They just didn't close them out, and you have to slam the door when it's there. And, you know, as a result, you've picked up a loss. You can't have opportunities to sack a guy and let him squirt free to extend a drive. You can't have somebody come on a corner blitz without somebody picking up the receiver, and just so many mistakes. I think you'll see a cleaner game from that defense this week, and they'll need it. They're up against the best offense in the league.
Sammy, you mentioned that best offense in the league, and the one thing that seems to be kind of Baylor's kryptonite is quarterbacks who can move around and make things happen outside the pocket, and that's what Caleb Williams does really well. Not the best week to be having to recoup that after Chandler Morris just 6 days ago.
Right. On its face, that aspect of the matchup is troubling for Baylor, but at the same time, you've got a week where basically everybody in that defensive room is going to be focused on nothing but that after you basically had one of the more embarrassing outings you could have defensively. And as a result of that, I think you'll see something a little better. And remember, Baylor did an outstanding job going into Norman last year. I remember being on this radio show with you guys last year talking about how difficult it was going to be for them to slow Oklahoma down. And what do Roberts and Aranda do? They don't have Kalen Barnes. They've got a convert center at nose tackle. They got Josh Landry at defensive tackle. And they're having to play jack linebackers at the field end spot. And they're able to go and hold Oklahoma better than just about anybody did last year. Higher percentage sacks, higher percentage tackles for loss, held the running backs completely in check, did a very good job limiting big passing plays as well, really made Oklahoma work for just about everything. Unfortunately, the offense couldn't get on track, which was a recurring theme last year. But, you know, this is an offense that's outstanding, and they have a bye week to prepare for you. But Aranda has a pretty good track record over his last few matchups with Lincoln Riley and with a lot of these air raid teams. And I have to imagine he's got a pretty good game plan to mitigate a lot of what Oklahoma does, because Oklahoma is built on power running game. They'll do zone schemes, they'll do gap schemes, and then they'll build some play action looks off of it and some RPOs off of it that are pretty deadly. And what I remember from that game last year is a lot of those go-tos for Oklahoma, Baylor was well schooled on it. The drag route screen, Petrie detonated the receiver, saw it coming a mile away. A lot of the concepts they do where they have in-breaking routes on one side of the field and bring a guy on a shallow route from the other side and try and sneak him vertically after that. Oklahoma tried that 2 or 3 times, and Baylor was all over it every time. They made the Oklahoma Sooners work for it last year, and Caleb Williams will make it a lot tougher to stop the run this year because you have to play things a little more honest on the backside of the formation. But, it's an interesting matchup, and I think Aranda should have a pretty good game plan in place.
Sam, Gary obviously had the interception to end the game last week when Baylor was right there knocking on the door of a game-winning field goal. It can't happen. Just can't happen. But, had the one earlier in the game in the end zone that was tipped up and, point wherever you want to on that one. But overall, how did you feel like he played last week in comparison to what we've seen from him previously? And what are you looking for maybe in terms of sharpening the iron, so to speak, and what he will need to do this week against an Oklahoma defense that can bring a lot of pressure, got a lot of guys up front and get in the backfield?
Well, I think Gary played okay. He missed a few reads that could have extended drives, and he was a little late on that deep throw that got tipped, and he was late and inside on the throw that ultimately got picked to end the game. But I don't think he played terrible. I think the offense took way too long to adjust to some of the things TCU was doing, and it's not anything overwhelming that they were doing. They were well scouted, and they had a good game plan for Baylor. But little things like slanting your line and bringing an edge pressure off of the side alongside that with tight coverage, it took them a while to take some deep shots against that. And even some of the boot action that they were doing, just play action and roll out and hit the check down, that took too long to get going, and they were able to hit Ben Sims for a pretty decent gain on it, but you're letting 2 or 3 drives go by, allowing them to camp out on you and really do some aggressive stunts and do what they can to try and take away the wide zone. It's coming. You've got to adjust sooner.
So it's Caleb Williams, we know, can wing it. He could throw a football through a keyhole. We also know he throws one of the prettiest deep passes I've ever seen. And yet again, he can hurt you with his legs, as Chandler Morris did, a different style guy. But so do you put pressure? You want to put pressure on him, but how dangerous is that if you don't get to him?
Well, it's dangerous whether you get to him or not, because Lincoln Riley is very good at taking the rules that your secondary guys are following in coverage and turning them against you. So if they know your guy is checking to the first receiver on this side and then looking at the second receiver, depending on which routes they run, he'll take those rules and use those to get them out of position. He's done a wonderful job using formations, tempo, and just different personnel groups, because they've got 3 or 4 tight ends that can split out as receivers. Their running backs can split out, so they can line up in virtually any formation without substituting and stress the very structure of your defense. So I think you do have to come after him. You have to mix it up in how you do it, but you have to come after him because the kid's outstanding, and you can't let him sit back there. And, he still is a freshman, though. The interception he threw against Kansas, he had a guy wide open in the flat that would have been an easy dump off, get 12 yards, live to see another down. He was late recognizing the first read that was deep and wide open that could have been a touchdown, and then he tried to force it to his second read. So while this kid is amazing and easily one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12, he's still a freshman. He still has some room to develop, and you've got to get some pressure on him, see if this kid, who's fairly early in his development, will cough up a couple mistakes or that might turn into turnovers, or at the very least help you get off the field. Because, you can lose track of somebody, but if they don't see him and they don't put the ball on him, you live to see another down and they're not beating you. You dial up some pressure, you get to them to the best of your ability, and you just don't make it easy on them. Baylor did a good job of it last year, and hopefully they can do it on Saturday.
Sam, in regards to that pressure, one thing that has been a common theme all year long is a lack of pressure at times, and not being able to get pressure without sending Petrie or Bernard in there screaming hot on a blitz. So when you're looking at the Baylor D-line or the Baylor defense, where is that missing pressure in your where is that happening to where they're unable to find that as much as they would like to?
Well, it's a little bit of different things. Part of them not getting pressure without sending certain guys is the structure of the defense. This is a defense that's designed to have 3 primarily anti-run guys up front.
Right.
And They specialize in creepers, which is bringing a fourth rusher from different spots and doing so disguised, or simulated pressures, where you show like you're bringing 5 or 6, and then you're only bringing 4, but based off the way you've studied your opponent, you know they're going to do man-on-man protection, so you send an inside backer. Or you know they're doing slide protection, and you know you can get a good matchup of a running back against an edge linebacker. So part of it's the fact that this defense is designed to stop the run and then pick their spots to get favorable matchups in pass rush. So with that being the case, you've got guys that would be defensive tackles in more of a 4-3 style defense playing defensive end for you. And that's 2 of your 4 rushers. And you have a true nose tackle in Siaki Ika, who, for a 340-pounder, the guy moves incredibly well, but that's still 340 pounds. The guy is not going to be blown by the edge at that speed. And,
right.
You know, so to a certain degree, guys have to win matchups. They got to get to their spots, and that needs to improve. But also part of that is still tied to the scheme that you're running, and it takes some pretty unique talent to be able to do both in terms of holding up against the run and some of what they ask them to do, and also show up and get some of the pressure on the quarterback that way.
Is it better for Baylor to get into a game? Well, I mean, obviously, I think I know the answer to this, but Baylor can put up some points. Is this a game where they need to try to dummy it down a little bit as far as use a little bit of the brakes, but still, or can they win a shootout with Oklahoma?
Well, I think if I had to game plan a successful way for Baylor to win this, I look at the Kansas and Kansas State games. Oklahoma had maybe somewhere between 8 to 10 drives in those games because the opponent kept working them on the edge, had their base runs open a lot of that up for them, by the way. And then they were able to get high percentage completions built off of their base run game. I mean, Kansas is another wide zone team. And while they had some success running wide zone, the Kansas offensive line is not the best. And it was more sporadic inside, but a lot of the arc reads and other ways they got the quarterback on the perimeter, that worked. They had a reverse that worked. And both those teams did a really good job of attacking the field side flat, where Oklahoma was taking their corner and dropping him really deep. And they were able to get a lot of high percentage completions there. And that's something Bohannon's been able to work basically all year. So if you can run your offense, milk the clock, consistently gain yards, not necessarily just with the run. I mean, you lead with that because you need to make sure that they respect it. But if you can stay on the field, which is something Baylor's done outstanding at the vast majority of the year, you make it to where each freshman mistake that Caleb Williams makes looms that much larger. I mean, if you kill a drive off a freshman mistake and it's a game like their game against Texas where you have 15, 16 drives, that doesn't hurt you nearly as much as a game where you have 8 and your opponent's scoring nearly every time. I mean, to give you an idea of just how perfect Oklahoma had to be in that second half against Kansas, of all the times they got to third down, they had to convert all of them to escape Lawrence. And even within that, you know, you had a fourth down play where Caleb Williams had to break 2 tackles and take it to the house. And then you had another one where Kansas had Kennedy Brooks in the backfield and Caleb Williams took the ball from him. And after a lengthy review of, is this legal?
Yep.
They survived. You know, Oklahoma's defense is not the best. They've been without some of their better guys at corner, and they lost their best pass rusher off of last year's team. And they really haven't been able to find their level in that sense. I mean, when I look at yards per drive surrendered, and especially compared to the opponents they're playing, this defense statistically has been performing about as bad as the 17 and 18 years that have been lampooned around Norman for a while. You know, they were a good defense the last couple of years, but this year just hasn't matched that. And I mean, offensively, they're very good, and Caleb Williams has been lighting the world on fire. But ever since that Texas game, they've been facing bottom of the conference defenses. And while Baylor is certainly coming off an ugly game, Baylor still represents a step up in defensive competition. So if you can get that offense going the way that they were able to do it in the Kansas State and Kansas games against OU, I got to think Baylor can break serve defensively. Bears got a chance to win this. And I would not be surprised at all if they won it.
I'm with you, Sam. I think they've got a great chance to win this game. I mean, I'll pick Oklahoma right now, but I definitely am not ruling out the possibility of an upset brewing in Waco, and I think Oklahoma's going to be ready for it as well. I'm curious, straight up right now, who you taking, Oklahoma or Oklahoma State?
I want to watch the film to see how much of the pressure Oklahoma got on him last year was Ronnie Perkins.
Yeah.
But I don't trust Spencer Sanders to hold on to the ball, but man, that Cowboy defense is good. And man, the Oklahoma defense has regressed. You know, right now I'd probably have to lean Pokes just because I think defense travels. And, you know, they got so much pressure on Spencer Sanders last year. I got to think that without Ronnie Perkins, they're not going to be able to do that to the same degree. And I think their overall defensive struggles would stick around. But I do think Iowa State could be a lot of problems for Oklahoma as well.
Sam, I have less than 30 seconds, and I know that's not a lot of time. Do you think Baylor should have kept launching balls deep against TCU in that game?
I think they should have. But it depends on the situation. At the end where they threw the pick, I do not agree with it at that point, because if you score with 1:30 left, do you like your chances? Do you like your chances stopping Chandler Morris, or do you like your chances trying to milk some clock and kick a field goal to win?
Thank you. As always, Sam Bradshaw, S11 on the site, S11 on Twitter. And as J.D. Piquel told somebody yesterday who asked, why do I have to listen or want to listen? He goes, he's like the Rain Man when it comes to breaking it down, X's and O's. We appreciate it.